Tonight, our liturgy has taken an unusual shift. As a church, we are in the year B, is what we refer to. We have a 3-year cycle of readings. Year A, we generally read from Matthew's Gospel. Year B, which is where we're in at the moment, we read from Mark's Gospel. And year C, we read from Luke's Gospel. And John's Gospel we get mainly during Lent and the Easter season. But in the middle of ordinary time in year B, we stop reading Mark's Gospel, and tonight we've begun with a 5-week investigation into John chapter 6, which is Christ's great teaching about the Eucharist, about the bread of life. And it begins with the gospel we had tonight, the feeding of the 5,000, the multiplications of the loaves and the fish, where Jesus for the first times takes bread, gives thanks, breaks it, and gives this food to the multitude. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to read through John chapter 6. Many of us tonight in Sydney and right across our country are in lockdown. We're up to maybe 4 or 5 weeks now where we haven't been able to come to Mass in person. Many of us haven't been able to receive the Eucharist. At different times in our lives, some of us might have taken the Eucharist for granted, to think, oh, well, I don't really need to come to Mass. The Eucharist is not that important. There are other more important things in my life, whether it's work, whether it's gathering with families, whether it's exercise or travel and so on. But I've heard from people over just in the last couple of weeks, and you might be feeling this as well, that people are starting to feel hungry. Hungry again to be in the church. Hungry for the Eucharist. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to hear more and more about Jesus and the bread of life. We just get the beginning of it today. But over the next few weeks, we will hear more and more about the Eucharist. Because the church, this time of the year, and every couple of years, we have a series of weeks designated to think about the Eucharist. In our parish this week, what had been planned prior to COVID is that we would be beginning today our program in preparation for First Holy Communion. We'll still be beginning that program, but we'll be doing our program online in preparation, hopefully in September or in October or maybe later in the year, to be able to have First Holy Communion for our candidates. For all of us though, let us renew a belief in the Eucharist, that what actually happens here is incredible. Sometimes when people think of the story of the feeding of the 5,000, they think, oh, that was just a story about generosity. You had one little boy, perhaps like our little server tonight, who came out and said, oh, I've got 5 little rolls and a couple of fish. And we're told, well, what's that between all this 5,000 or more people? And some people think, oh, well, people just all brought out their lunches and Jesus didn't need to feed the 5,000. But what we're actually told is that Jesus says to feed the people. He doesn't say, oh, everyone pull out your lunch now. That's not what happens. And we're given a window into what actually happens from our first reading. The prophet Elisha in the Old Testament worked incredible wonders, miracles. We know a lot about the prophet Elijah, who preaches a little bit like the way that Jesus preaches with the Sermon on the Mount. He brings this great teaching, this great moral compass for us to follow. And that was the prophet Elijah. And we've been hearing about the role of the prophet over the last few weeks. But the first reading today, we have the prophet Elisha, who takes from just a small 20 rolls, he provides enough food and multiplies that with the work of God to feed 120. That was a miracle that happened in the first reading. And this gives us an indication of what Jesus is like as well. Elisha was known for being the miracle worker, the wonder worker. Multiplications of food, incredible healing of people. And what we've heard here at the beginning of today's gospel is that Jesus has been curing people, incredible illnesses. That's where we pick up in John's gospel. They had been seeing Jesus as the miracle worker. And then Jesus, before he starts to teach them, and that's what we'll hear over the next few weeks, he then sits the people down into orderly groups, and when they're ready, he feeds them. And this is what Jesus does for us as well. He provides food for us, nourishment for us. It's not just an idea. These aren't just words. Jesus actually provides us real, tangible food. But it's not just food of this world. It's food that brings God into us. And so that when we receive the Eucharist, as opposed to our bodies absorbing the food and processing the food, it happens actually that we become absorbed into the life of God, that God starts to dwell and make his home within us. Such an incredible gift. And we'll hear more about this over the next few weeks. St. Paul in the second reading invites us and reminds us to be charitable with each other. And I think this is a good reminder for us all. After several weeks of lockdown, people are starting to feel a bit caged. And we feel like we want to get out. But Paul says we're called to be patient. I think this is a great virtue and something to pray for at this moment. Let's not be tempted to just go out and protest or to just say, oh, I've had enough of these rules. We need to be charitable with each other and to pray patiently with each other. And to pray patiently with the rules that are being put in place for our health, for our well-being, so that we can gather together again in a very short time. Because that's what Jesus designs for us. He wants us to gather together. Pope Francis has dedicated tomorrow as Grandparents' Day. I know it's been hard for many of us not being able to see our parents or our grandparents at this time. But Pope Francis has said, and he's asked us to reach out to our grandparents and to the elderly tomorrow. On Monday is the feast day of St. Joachim and Anne, who are the grandparents of Jesus, the parents of Mary. And whether we can reach out to our grandparents in person, or more than likely, we can reach out to them virtually, to spend some time with them, to listen to them, maybe even to pray with them. And Pope Francis has said he's going to give what's called a plenary indulgence, which is a special grace for every person who can reach out to their grandparents or the elderly tomorrow and on Monday, and then to pray for the church, to pray for the forgiveness of our sins, and to make an act of spiritual communion, like we will during the Mass today. Coming to communion, we become completely at one with God and one with our family and our community. That's what's meant to happen when we come to the Eucharist. We can't do that in person, but that doesn't mean that can't continue to happen spiritually. So let's not take the gift of the Eucharist for granted. Let's not take our elderly for granted, and let's not take our parents or our grandparents for granted. Let us do what we can to bear patiently with them, to be charitable with each other, and to look forward to the time where the restrictions are lifted and we can gather together and to receive Jesus again in the church. Live streaming is good during times of pandemic. But really what Jesus wants us to do is to gather as a community. So at the moment we can't gather, but let's know as soon as the restrictions are gone, let's not take the Eucharist for granted anymore. Let's love the Eucharist, love this gift that Jesus gives to us, and let us live out the way of Jesus charitably and patiently with each other throughout this week. Blessings to you all.